The story of Phineas Gage, the man who survived an iron rod blasting completely through his skull, has long been a case study for scientists, particularly in studies of the brain. Why are we who we are? How much is a product of how we are raised, and how much is a product of simple biology? More specifically, neurology. If our personalities are products of our brains, then the idea of who we are, our very identities, can change, perhaps becoming wholly different if our brains change, particularly through trauma. It is a fascinating idea, and the story of Phineas Gage, because the defining incident of his life occurred as science moved into the modern age, is a sort of ground zero for cerebral localization, the concept in neuroscience that the brain is split into areas of specialized functions. Gage was born in July of 1823 in New Hampshire, where he grew up as the oldest of his parents' 5 children. Dr. John Martin Harlow, who treated Gage after his accident, described him as a normal, average young man of 5'6" and 150 pounds. By the summer of 1848, he was employed as a blasting foreman for the Hudson River Railroad in New York. Gage supervised the blasting of rocks and impediments in the construction of railroad lines. The job required holes to be drilled into rock and then filled with blasting powder and a fuse, and then the hole was filled by tamping sand and dirt into the hole before the fuse was lit. On September 13th, Gage was at work when he was distracted by men working behind him. His tamping rod inadvertently sparked against the rock before the blasting powder had been covered, and it ignited, blasting his iron rod through the cheek under his left eye and out the top of his head, landing about 30 yards away. What followed defied all logic and medical science. Although he convulsed briefly on the ground when the bar passed through his skull, Gage never lost consciousness, and he sat upright as he was driven into town to see a doctor, with whom he conversed as the doctor peered through the hole in Gage's head and saw his pulsating brain. Harlow was called in as a consulting doctor, and he cleaned the wound, replaced 2 pieces of protruding bone, and removed more than an ounce of brain matter that had leaked out as Gage was being treated. He spent the next few weeks fluctuating between periods of seeming normalcy and being semi-comatose. Within 10 weeks, however, he was well enough to return to his parents' home in New Hampshire. The last 12 years of his life are shrouded in contradictory accounts. Harlow and others say his personality altered, with Gage becoming more coarse, irritable, and intolerant. But others who worked with Gage when he became a South American coach driver in Chile described him as affable, disciplined, and responsible. How much his brain was damaged and how much it changed him is a debatable mystery. But there is no doubt that the trauma haunted him for the remainder of his life, and by 1859 he began suffering from frequent epileptic seizures. By 1860, he had returned to the United States, joining his mother and sister, who had moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. On May 20th, he went into a severe and prolonged seizure, and Gage died the next day at age 36. Gage's life and the effects of his injury are debated to this day, and his skull and the tamping iron that went through it are on display at the Warren Anatomical Museum at Harvard Medical School. Who was Phineas Gage really? We will never truly know.